The night was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the only person awake in the whole world. I lay in bed, the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the rhythmic breathing of my husband, Mark, next to me. Our bedroom window was slightly ajar, letting in the cool breeze that whispered secrets of the night. I couldn't sleep, not with the weight of what happened earlier pressing down on me like a physical force. My name is Alice, and tonight, something happened that I can't shake off. Something that feels like a betrayal of the worst kind. I glanced over at Mark, his face peaceful in sleep, unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. My heart ached with a secret I wasn't ready to share, not with him, not with anyone. Earlier that evening, as I was getting ready for bed, our dog, Max, did something unexpected. Something that left me questioning everything. Max, who had always been just a part of our family, a loyal companion, had crossed a line I never thought possible. I remember the shock, the confusion, the rush of emotions as I stood there, unable to move, unable to comprehend. How could something so innocent turn so wrong? Now, as I lay in the dark, I wrestled with my thoughts. Should I tell Mark? How could I explain this without sounding insane? The very thought of his reaction, the potential disbelief or worse, the blame, made my stomach churn. Max was downstairs now, his usual spot, but tonight, his presence felt different, almost accusatory. I could hear him moving around, his nails clicking against the hardwood floor, each sound a reminder of the night's earlier betrayal. Why did this happen? Was it my fault? Was it even Max's fault? Or was there something else at play here? The questions circled in my mind, each one leading to more confusion, more guilt. I turned over, facing away from Mark, staring into the darkness, feeling more alone than ever. The silence of the night seemed to mock me, as if it knew all my secrets, all my fears. What was I going to do? How could I go back to normal after tonight? The answers eluded me, leaving only the echo of betrayal hanging in the air, a silent witness to my inner turmoil. The next morning, the sunlight felt intrusive, as if it had no right to shine so brightly after the darkness I'd experienced. I dragged myself out of bed, careful not to wake Mark, who was still lost in the oblivion of sleep. The house was quiet, too quiet, amplifying the chaos inside my head. I went through the motions of my morning routine, each action feeling heavier than the last. As I poured coffee into my mug, my hand shook slightly, spilling a few drops onto the counter. I cleaned it up mechanically, my mind elsewhere, replaying the events of last night over and over. Max trotted into the kitchen, his tail wagging, oblivious to the tension he'd caused. I looked at him, trying to reconcile the loving pet with the creature that had betrayed me in such an intimate way. "Hey, buddy," I managed to say, my voice flat. He licked my hand, his eyes full of innocence. The day unfolded with its usual demands. Mark left for work, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek, his routine unchanged, unaware of the storm brewing within me. I watched him drive away, feeling the distance between us grow, not just physically but emotionally. I decided to take Max for a walk, hoping the fresh air might clear my mind. The neighborhood was bustling with the usual morning activities: kids waiting for the school bus, neighbors walking their dogs, the smell of someone's breakfast wafting through the air. Everything seemed normal, yet for me, nothing was. As we walked, I noticed Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor, struggling with her groceries. I offered to help, needing the distraction. "Thanks, Alice. You're a lifesaver," she said, her voice warm and appreciative. "No problem," I replied, forcing a smile. While we walked back to her house, she chatted about her day, the weather, and how her cat had been acting up. I nodded along, but my thoughts were elsewhere, tangled up in my own personal drama. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, debating whether to call my sister Sarah. She was always good at giving advice, but this was beyond anything I'd ever dealt with. Max sat at my feet, looking up at me with those big brown eyes. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "What do I do with you?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was the mailman with a package. I signed for it, noticing how ordinary the interaction was, how normal life seemed from the outside. But inside, I was anything but normal. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, cooking, trying to anchor myself in the mundane to escape the looming decision about Max. Every time I looked at him, the betrayal felt fresh, yet the love and history we shared tugged at my heart. As the afternoon turned into evening, I knew I had to make a decision. The thought of giving Max away to my father seemed like a solution, but it was laced with guilt. Could I really do that to him? To us? The day ended much like it began, with me feeling alone in my turmoil, the weight of my secret growing heavier with each passing hour. The normalcy of life around me only served to highlight the abnormality of my situation, a stark contrast that left me feeling more isolated than ever. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our living room, I sat on the couch, my mind racing. Max lay at my feet, his head resting on his paws, looking up at me with what seemed like a mix of confusion and concern. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for even considering giving him away. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Sarah. I hesitated before answering, unsure if I wanted to share this bizarre and painful experience. "Hey Alice, you sound off. What's up?" Sarah's voice was always comforting, a reminder of simpler times. I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Something really weird happened with Max last night, and I'm just not sure what to do." There was a pause on the other end. "Weird how?" she asked cautiously. I recounted the incident, my voice barely above a whisper, half expecting her to laugh or dismiss it. Instead, she listened intently, her silence encouraging me to continue. "Alice, that sounds... well, it's a lot. Have you thought about talking to a vet or maybe a behaviorist? It might not be what you think," Sarah suggested, her tone gentle yet practical. I hadn't thought of that. My mind had been so clouded with betrayal and confusion that practical solutions seemed out of reach. I guess I could, I admitted, feeling a slight relief at the possibility of an explanation. After hanging up, I felt a bit more grounded, but the problem remained. I couldn't just let this go. The next morning, I made an appointment with our vet, Dr. Ellis, for the following day. The night was restless, filled with dreams where Max was not just a dog, but a silent judge of my life. I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all, the weight of the upcoming vet visit adding to my anxiety. At the vet's office, Max was his usual friendly self, tail wagging, sniffing around curiously. Dr. Ellis, a kind woman in her 50s, greeted us warmly. "What seems to be the trouble with Max?" she asked, her eyes scanning him for any visible signs of distress. I explained the situation, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Dr. Ellis listened without judgment, her face thoughtful. "This isn't common, Alice, but it's not unheard of. Dogs can exhibit behaviors that mimic human actions, especially if they're confused or overly stimulated. Let's run some tests to rule out any medical issues." The tests took time, and while we waited, I sat in the waiting room, flipping through magazines without really seeing them. My thoughts were a whirlwind of what-ifs and how-coulds. When Dr. Ellis returned, she confirmed Max was healthy, but suggested his behavior might be due to a mix of stress, hormones, or even just a one-time anomaly. "I recommend neutering if you haven't already, and perhaps some behavioral training. It might help stabilize him." The solution seemed straightforward, yet it didn't erase the incident from my memory. As we drove back home, I felt a mix of relief and unresolved tension. Max, in the back seat, seemed oblivious to the storm he'd caused in my life. That evening, I sat down with Mark, the decision weighing heavily on me. I couldn't keep this from him any longer. "Mark, there's something I need to tell you about Max," I began, my voice shaky. He looked up from his laptop, concern etching his features. "What's wrong?" I told him everything, watching his expressions shift from confusion to shock, then to something unreadable. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with unspoken questions and judgments. "Alice, why didn't you tell me sooner?" His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of hurt. I am ashamed, Mark. I didn't know how you'd react," I confessed, tears threatening to spill. He reached out, taking my hand. "We'll figure this out together. Maybe we need to look at our home environment, see if there's something triggering Max." The conversation opened a door to a new dynamic in our relationship. It wasn't just about the incident with Max. It was about trust, communication, and the unspoken fears we both harbored. As the days passed, we implemented changes. Max was neutered, and we started training sessions with a professional. Slowly, the atmosphere at home began to shift. Yet the incident lingered like a ghost, a reminder of how fragile our sense of normalcy could be. The tension between Mark and me wasn't resolved overnight. There were moments of awkwardness, silent dinners, and nights where we lay in bed, both lost in our thoughts. But we were trying, both to understand Max and to rebuild what felt broken between us. This wasn't just about Max's behavior. It was about our ability to face unexpected challenges, to communicate, and to forgive. The betrayal, though bizarre, had become a catalyst for deeper introspection and hopefully a stronger bond. As the days turned into weeks, the once comforting routine of our home had morphed into something tense and unfamiliar. Max, now neutered and under the guidance of a behaviorist, seemed to be adjusting, but the incident had left a mark on our relationship that wasn't so easily healed. One evening, after another silent dinner, Mark and I sat in the living room, the TV on but neither of us watching. The weight of our unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Alice. Mark finally broke the silence, his voice low. I've been thinking about us, about Max, about everything. I turned to face him, my heart sinking. I knew this conversation was coming, but I wasn't ready for it. What about us, Mark? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I feel like we've been living in this shadow of what happened. I'm trying, Alice. But every time I look at Max, or at you, I see that night. The admission stung, but it was the truth we'd been dancing around. I know, I whispered. I feel it too. It's like we're stuck. He nodded, his eyes not meeting mine. I've been talking to my brother, and he mentioned a friend who could take Max. Someone who lives out in the country, with space for him to run, to be a dog again. The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. Giving Max away felt like admitting defeat, like erasing a part of our family. Mark, he's part of us. Can we really just give him away? It's not about giving him away, Alice. It's about giving us a chance to heal, to move past this without the constant reminder. Tears welled up in my eyes, not just for Max, but for the fracture in our marriage. I thought we were working on this together. The training, the vet visits. I thought we were trying to fix it. We are, he said, his voice breaking. But maybe fixing it means letting go of something that keeps pulling us back to that moment. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of our dilemma. I looked at Max, who lay quietly by the fireplace, his eyes following our conversation with a sense of understanding that only deepened my guilt. I need some time to think, I said, standing up abruptly. I'm going for a walk. Outside, the cool night air did little to soothe my turmoil. I walked aimlessly, the streetlights casting long shadows that mirrored the darkness within. My mind replayed the conversation, Mark's words, and the silent plea in Max's eyes. I found myself at the park, sitting on a bench where Max and I used to play fetch. The emptiness of the space echoed the emptiness I felt inside. Was I betraying Max by considering giving him away? Or was I betraying Mark by holding on to something that might be irreparably damaging our relationship? My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Sarah. How are you holding up? I typed back, not sure. Mark wants to give Max away. Her response was quick. That's tough, Alice. But remember, It's about what's best for everyone, including Max. I sat there, staring at the screen, the words blurring through my tears. The decision was monumental, not just for Max, but for the future of my marriage, for our trust, for our ability to move forward. As I walked back home, the decision loomed over me, a dark cloud threatening to unleash a storm. I knew I had to make a choice, one that would define not just our immediate future, but the essence of our family. Entering the house, I found Mark waiting, his expression one of concern mixed with resolve. "Did you decide?" he asked, his voice gentle. I took a deep breath, the weight of the world on my shoulders. I think we need to talk about what best really means for all of us. Not just for now, but for the long run. The night stretched on, our conversation a delicate dance of emotions, hopes, and fears. The decision wasn't made then, but the stage was set for the climax of our story, where every choice would lead to irreversible consequences. As I stood in our dimly lit living room, the weight of Mark's proposal hung between us like a thick fog. The silence was heavy, filled with the ticking of the clock and the occasional soft snoring from Max, who lay oblivious on his bed by the fireplace. "I've been thinking, Alice." Mark's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his turmoil. "Maybe giving Max away isn't about betrayal. Maybe it's about giving him a chance to be happy, away from whatever stress he's feeling here. And maybe, just maybe, it's about us finding our way back to each other without this constant reminder." I felt a tear escape, trailing down my cheek. "But Mark, he's part of our family. We've been through so much together. How can we just decide to let him go?" Mark moved closer, his hand reaching for mine, a gesture of comfort that felt both familiar and foreign. "I know, Alice. I love Max too. But our relationship, our marriage, it's been strained. I look at him, and I see that night. I see your pain, your confusion. I want that to be replaced with something better, something joyful." The truth in his words was undeniable. Our home, once filled with laughter and the simple joys of pet ownership, had become a silent battleground of unresolved emotions. "But what if we're making a mistake?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What if we regret this?" Mark sighed, pulling me into a gentle embrace. "We might. But we've tried everything, haven't we? The vet, the training, the time, and yet, here we are, still stuck. Maybe this isn't just about Max. Maybe it's about us, about what we need to heal." The room seemed to close in around us, the walls echoing with the gravity of our decision. I looked over at Max, his tail thumping softly against the floor, his eyes reflecting a trust that felt like a knife to my heart. "I need to know one thing," I said, pulling back to look into Mark's eyes. "Do you still love me, Mark? Despite all this?" His gaze softened, and he cupped my face in his hands. "Alice, I've never stopped loving you. This has been hard, but my love for you hasn't changed. If anything, it's made me realize how much I want to fight for us." The sincerity in his voice broke something inside me. It was a moment of clarity, a revelation that this wasn't just about Max, but about our future, our happiness. Okay, I said, the word feeling like a stone in my throat. Let's find him a good home. But we do this together. We make sure he's going somewhere he'll be loved, where he can be a dog again, without the shadows of what happened here. Mark nodded, relief washing over his features. Together, he agreed. That night, as we lay in bed, the decision we made felt like a betrayal, but not in the way I had feared. It was a betrayal of our past selves, the ones who couldn't see beyond the immediate pain. Now, we were choosing a path that might lead to healing, not just for Max, but for us. The next morning, we contacted Mark's friend, a man named John, who lived on a sprawling farm. He was known for his love of animals, and his place was a haven for dogs needing space to roam and be free. We arranged for Max to visit to see if it would be a good fit. The drive to the farm was quiet, filled with a mix of hope and sorrow. Max sat in the back, his head out the window, the wind ruffling his fur, seemingly unaware of the life-changing journey he was on. When we arrived, John greeted us warmly, his eyes lighting up at the sight of Max. "He'll have the run of the place here," John promised, showing us the vast fields where other dogs played and chased each other. Watching Max interact with John, seeing his tail wag with genuine excitement, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about letting go. It was about giving Max a new beginning, one where he could be just a dog, without the complexities of human emotions weighing him down. As we left, Max stayed, his new life beginning. The drive back was silent, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of acceptance, of understanding that sometimes love means letting go. Conclusion. Months passed since Max had found his new home on John's farm. The house felt different without him, quieter, and in a way, emptier. But there was also a lightness, a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. Mark and I had taken to visiting Max every other weekend. Each time we saw him thriving, his coat shinier, his energy boundless as he ran through the fields with other dogs. It was a bittersweet sight. The joy of seeing him happy was tinged with the sadness of our choice. One crisp autumn afternoon, as we sat on John's porch, watching Max play, I turned to Mark. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes thoughtful. "I've thought about it a lot, Alice. At first, yes, there was regret. But now, seeing him like this, I think we did the right thing. For him, for us." I nodded, feeling the truth in his words. It's like we gave him a second chance at being just a dog, and in doing so, we gave ourselves a chance to heal. Mark squeezed my hand. "We did. And you know, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we start thinking about our next chapter too. Not just for us, but for our family." The word family hung in the air, a reminder of what we had lost and what we could still gain. You mean, I think we can think about the future. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.